All right, good morning, everyone. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be here, to be able to do a study and bring something to inspire, to instruct in terms of Spiritism. Today, the lecture is called Seek and You Will Find. And most of the things that were extracted for this lecture brought here for you guys are from chapter 25 of the Gospel according to Spiritism that has the same title, Seek and You Will Find. And this little passage, Seek and You Will Find, actually comes from Matthew 7, chapter 7, when he wrote that, Ask and it will be given to you, Jesus said, Seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Meaning, ask and it will be given, seeking and you will find, knock and it's going to be open. So all of these three things, they're saying the same message. They're all saying that whenever we search for something, whenever we ask for something, and we'll see the conditionals behind that, it will be received. The door will be open. We will find whatever it is that we're seeking. And still in chapter 7, Matthew continues, and it says, the Gospel of Matthew continues saying, Or what man is there among you who, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, meaning us, being still in this state that we are, far from being completely good, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? So it's saying our Heavenly Father, God, will not give us a serpent when we ask for a fish, etc., because it's infinitely good and we're still evil. And even us being evil, if our son asks for something, we'll give it to him. We give it to him. From an earthly point of view, then, the maxim seek, and this is from the Gospel according to Spiritism, and you shall find is the same as the other one. Help yourselves and the heavens will come to your aid. This is the base of the law of work and consequently the law of progress, since progress is the child of work, seeing that this puts into action the force of intelligence. So the first part there is talking about how if we help ourselves, heaven will come to our aid, but we must do something. So there is already an active component to this sentence that I find so interesting, that we must do something. We must help ourselves, and then heaven will come to our aid. And then it's talking about the law of work and the law of progress. So this active component being part of the law of work and the law of progress. And even the gospel even goes as far as to say that everything in nature works. The Spiritist book also has a question that says that everything in nature labors. And we humans, the difference between us and spirits that are less evolved, as in animals, etc., is that we don't only labor for self-preservation. We also labor for progress. And that's a key difference here. So again, talking about the law of work and the law of progress. In the Spirit's book now, question 675, they asked the spirits, ought we understand by labor only occupations of material nature? And they will answer, no. The spirit labors like the body. Every sort of useful occupation is a labor. And this is from chapter 3 of the Spirit's book. And so labor is not only material, every sort of useful occupation, because oftentimes we think of labor as something that will have to yield some sort of financial compensation. That's not always the case. That they're saying here that the spirit labors just like the body. Or if we think about it, when we fall asleep, when we go to the spirit planes, we're also laboring there as well. And we're not necessarily getting anything material in return. Question 676, why is labor imposed upon mankind? And they're going to say, it is a consequence of his corporeal nature, of man's corporeal nature. It is an expiation and at the same time a means of developing his intelligence. Without labor, man would remain in the infancy of intelligence, meaning it's an expiation and at the same time a means of developing our intelligence. It's a means for us to progress, for us to evolve as eternal spirits. So we have this labor. And then they go on and they ask about rest, if rest is also, a law of nature. And yes, because we do have limits to our strength and we must rest, but the rest must be something that is of good nature, not necessarily just idly sitting by and doing nothing. And then what about the law of progress? In the Spirit's book, we're going to have these questions about the law of progress. Question 779, they ask, does man contain in himself the force that impels him onward in the path of progress, or is his progress only the product of instruction, aka instruction from the spirits? Do we have in ourselves the force to propel ourselves forward, or is it only the product of instruction? They're going to say, man is developed of himself naturally, but all men do not progress at the same rate, nor in the same manner. And it is thus that most advances are made to help forward the others through social contact. And with this part, they're already talking about how the mission of us incarnate spirits to help each other through social contact. We have the law of society. We are here incarnated amongst other brothers and sisters, and one of our missions, one of our goals is to help each other. And they say here that, does moral progress always follow intellectual progress? It is a consequence of the latter, but does not always follow it immediately. So it is a consequence, but does not always follow it immediately. It's not something that happens right after, because we as a society nowadays, we have progressed enough intellectually, but not enough morally. And that's why we're seeing the transition of our planet and everything, and a lot of the free will comes into that, where these actions that we take, that we do, all of the things that we do, permeating our free will, they're going to either advance or they're going to halt progress, but they can never stop or retract. We can only slow progress, which is good news, because we're always progressing. The bad deeds, let's call it, they can only stop and slow down the march of progress. And then one of the questions that I think it's amazing, 785 asks, what is the biggest or the greatest obstacle to progress? And they're going to name two things, pride and selfishness. So those are the two scourges of our times, of ourselves, pride and selfishness, that they very much slow down the march of progress. Still in the Gospel according to Spiritism, when we're talking about the intelligence and the progress that relates to that, we have that they teach us that during mankind's infancy, he only used his intelligence in seeking food as a means of protection against the climate, or to fend off against enemies, to protect himself. So in the beginning of our intelligence, when we were in this condition of humans, we used our intelligence for these three basic things, which is, in other words, survival. We are seeking food. We're trying to protect ourselves from the elements with housing of any nature, and then we're fending off against our those who threaten our survivability. But they're saying in the Gospel according to Spiritism that God gave us something more that he didn't give to the animals, because the animals can also do that. They can seek food, they can seek shelter, they can fight off other threatening animals, but God gave us something else, which is the incessant desire to better himself. This is what the Gospel says. This desire to progress. And they're going to say, this is a passage from the book as well, it says, it is this desire which impels him, man, to seek out the best ways of improving his position in life, which duly leads him to make discoveries, to invent things, and to perfect the sciences, because it is science which gives him what he lacks. So the technological advancements, science, the cure for diseases, means to make our transportation easier, more sustainable, all of those things are achieved because of this incessant desire to better ourselves and better our conditions that the animals do not have. After material nourishment, man needs spiritual nourishment. This is how he passes from savagery to civilization. So talking about what this material nourishment that man needs, but after that, our bodies are nourished, we need the spiritual nourishment. And that's why in this day and age, more and more we find people and we find these struggles with this emptiness, existential emptiness, because it's lacking something else that's not material. It's lacking the spiritual nourishment. But the amount of progress achieved by each person during a single lifetime is very small indeed, in most cases even imperceptible. How then could humanity progress without pre-existence and re-existence of the soul? So the idea here is they're talking about reincarnation. They're talking about the soul coming back and reincarnating, and then we're progressing with every lifetime. We're progressing a little bit more. If the souls who daily leave the earth were never to return, then humanity would be constantly renewing itself with primitive elements, having everything still to do and learn. If we only, and this again is talking about this idea that we do reincarnate, our souls are immortals, because otherwise, if they just left, if we only had one shot to do everything we could here, and then we leave, batch of spirits come, and they only have one shot and all of that, progress will not be where it is today. We will not have everything that we have today, because otherwise it would be too random and it would be almost impossible to reach the stages that we are at the speed that we are. But so the idea is this pre-existence and re-existence, it says here, of the soul, meaning like these different stages that it goes through when reincarnated, to help with the progress. Because every time we are reincarnated, we learn something new, we contribute something new, then we go and we reincarnate, we already bring that with us, that desire to improvement and the knowledge that comes with that. There would be, and they continue with this argument, saying there would then be no reason why man should be more advanced today than he was during the first epochs of the world, because at each birth all intellectual work would have to recommence. On the other hand, by returning with the degree of progress realized and acquiring something more each time, the soul then gradually passes from the barbaric state to that of materialistic civilization, and then on to one of moral civilization. So again, this gradual process, this gradual evolution that the soul is going through, the humanity and the society is going through. And they're saying anytime we return with a degree of progress, especially intellectually advancements that we acquired previously, we already contribute something different, and then we continue moving forward and forward. If God had exempted man from bodily work, his limbs would have withered. So talking about law of work again. If he had exempted him from intellectual work, then his spirit would have remained in a state of infancy, of mere animal instinct. So if we did not need to work, if we did not need to labor, if we did not need to develop our intelligence, our morals, everything, all of those things would be useless, and this is again law of progress, law of work. This is why he made work a necessity by saying, seek and you shall find, work and you shall produce. In this way you are the product of your work. You receive the merit of it and a recompense in accordance with what has been done. So meaning we're the product of what we put in. However much we're putting in, we're going to be getting back. And the seek and you shall find here, talking about these opportunities for advancement, these opportunities for progress, are very much related to work. Because what is it that we're seeking with every reincarnation? What is it that we're seeking? If we think about it, this advancement, this progress, and it's going to come through our work. It's not going to come through us just sitting there idly and just waiting for work to be done for us. It is by virtue of this principle that the spirits do not help in sparing men the work of research by bringing them discoveries and inventions prepared and ready for use. Of course, this interchange with the spirit world and the material world, where we receive these inspirations that will help advance and help further our progress. Excuse me. If things were like that, then the laziest could enrich themselves and the most ignorant could become wise at the cost of no effort. And both would have merits attributed to them for things they have not done. Of course, if we didn't have the need to go there and seek the work, seek the improvement, and find it through our work. We would just be passively waiting for everything to happen to us and for us. No, the Spirit did not come to exempt man from the law of work, but only to show him that the goal to be reached and the pathway that leads there, by saying, walk and you will get there. So they come as almost as I like to say, a GPS. It tells us the path, but it doesn't walk us there. That you will find your path strewn with stones. Look upon them and then move them. We will give you the necessary strength if you care to utilize it. Meaning, we're going to find stones in our path. We're going to find barriers to our progress, to our advancement, to our work that we're seeking. But it's saying, look upon them and then move them. Move the stones out of the way or go around them. We, the spirits, will give you the necessary strength if you care to utilize it. So there is always help from the material plane. There's always help from the spirits in whatever work we're looking to do, in whatever progress we're trying to achieve, whatever it is that we're seeking, we're going to find. Especially if it's under the eyes of God, and if we're doing the labor of love in the work that Jesus did here 2,000 years ago. We're always going to find support for that. From the moral point of view, these words of Jesus signify that if we ask for the light which will show us the way, it will be given. If we ask for strength to resist evil, we shall receive it. And if we ask for the assistance of the good spirits, then they will come to accompany us. As we saw in the first slide, if we knock on the door, it's going to be open. If we seek, we will find. If we ask, we will receive. And they're saying here basically the same things that we found back in the Bible in Matthew chapter 7. If we are truly asking for the light to light our path, to dispel the darkness, we have that and we're going to receive that. If we're truly asking for the means to work, not for everything to just be given to us, we will find the necessary means to achieve that. But we must ask with sincerity, faith, confidence, and fervor. We must present ourselves with humility and not with arrogance, or else we will be abandoned to our own strength, and the false taken will be punishment for our pride, because we will find that pride is going to be our downfall if we're asking without sincerity, if we're asking without faith, if we're asking without the fervor that you're talking about, without putting our own work there as well. So in this slide here, we're already seeing that we will receive, but there's a conditional. And this conditional passes through how we are asking, how we are searching for these things. Are we asking with sincerity? Are we asking with confidence? Are we asking with fervor, or are we asking with arrogance? Or are we not asking at all because we're arrogant enough to think that we can do everything and do it our own way, and that's the way it is. And everybody's going to have to adapt to that. And then if we bring then again this conditional, we're talking about the role of faith. There is this passage in the Bible where Jesus was, told the disciples to carry on forward in the boat, and they went, and he went to pray in the mountain, and it was nighttime. It started to rain and become windy and everything. Jesus all of a sudden came walking on water, and then they saw, oh my God, it's a ghost. The disciples said, and Jesus said, no, it's not a ghost. It is I. And then Peter said, oh, if it's you, then I'm gonna walk to you on water as well. Peter said, the apostle. Jesus said, come. And then Peter went to him. But this is the interesting piece here. He said, Peter said, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. And Jesus said, come. And then Peter got down out of the boat, walked out in the water and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink in the water. And I think this passage is so interesting because it says here, when he saw the wind, and some translations of the Bible say that the wind was billowing and everything was it wasn't a good condition, a good environment for anybody to be walking on water, if there ever is one. But when he saw the wind, he started to sink, meaning what? His faith wavered. Which to me is so profound that this happened, because it leads us to think, is our faith wavering whenever there are these challenges, whenever there's the environment, whenever there's the wind blowing against us and making it scary? And then he started to sink and he said, Lord, save me. Jesus went, helped him out, extended a hand, caught him and said, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Why did you doubt? You of little faith. Meaning, and I wonder if the condition was perfect, would Peter have continued to have walked? Did he have that sort of faith already at that time? Was his faith enough? The fact is, regardless, we'll never know. But what happened was, with the wind, his faith wavered. And then he asked for help. And then Jesus was saying, why did you doubt? I told you could come. You could walk on water just like I did. Come to me if you had the faith. So the role of faith, whenever we're seeking and we're trying to find whatever it is that we're trying to find, is very important. And then, still on the Bible, in the same book as well, there's this passage where, also a famous one, where they were there, the disciples were there with Jesus. People started to gather. It was started to get late, and they were in a place that was a little secluded, and people started to get hungry. There was thousands of people there, and then Jesus said, "No, do not send them home. Give them something to eat." And they said, we can't give them to eat. There's too many people here. We don't have enough. So they brought like a handful of fish, a handful of bread, and they said, no, we don't have much. Jesus said, bring me what you have. So they brought the fish and they brought the bread, and as we know, Jesus raised it to the heavens, they did a prayer, and all of a sudden the multiplication of the fishes and the breads. But there is something that is very interesting about this passage too, to me, which is, do we really think that Jesus, being the Spirit that he is, billions of years old, even was already a spirit of his nature before earth was even formed? Do you really think he needed the fish and the bread? Did he really need the 2 pieces? I think it was 2 pieces of bread and 5 fishes. No, he could have created stuff out of nothing, but he still said, bring them here, meaning bring what you have and I'll multiply that. With that action, I think is already like giving us a message, meaning in order to receive, we must give. In order for us to receive something, whatever it is that we're seeking, because again, the lecture, seek and you shall find, we must give something in return. Because Jesus could make their hunger go away even without even the materials. Mm-hmm. But he said, bring them here, meaning bring what you have. And they brought. So again, it implies that we must give something to receive something. Back to the gospel, we have that God comprehends our necessities and provides for them when needed. Nevertheless, man is insatiable in his desires and does not always know how to be content with what he has. Possessing what is necessary is not enough for him. He demands that which is superfluous. Then providence leaves him to himself. Meaning, if we're asking for things that are superfluous, things that we don't need, providence is going to leave us by ourselves, because we already have way more than what we truly need. Frequently, he becomes unhappy through his own fault, and for having paid no attention to the voice which, through the intermediary of his conscience, which is where the laws of God are written, has given him warning. In these cases, the Lord lets him suffer the consequences so that it may serve as a lesson for the future. Meaning, it let him suffer the consequences, not as a punishment because of being mean and you're gonna suffer now, but because we ourselves, by seeking the superfluous, we're gonna always be let down, and then we're gonna suffer ourselves because of that. Because our conscience will tell us this is not what we needed. This is not what we should be focusing on. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own thing. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And I love this part here from Matthew, because sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And how often do we get caught up with future problems? Like imagining worst case scenarios and worrying too much about the future, and the present is just passing by. The time is just fleeting. And we're there with anxiety, which is a condition, a disorder of future worries. And we're there. So they're saying, don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will worry about its own thing. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And which is a beautiful passage, and I put the lilies here because even in the same, in the next sentence, what they talk about is how we sometimes worry about these things, food, clothing, and all of that in excess. And it says that even Solomon, in all its glory, with power, with material means, could not dress as well as the lilies of the field. And that's the passage in the Bible that says that. And God dresses, so they say, if God dresses every blade of grass, the lilies in the field, imagine what he has for us. And it says, will he not have much more to clothe you, you of little faith? So the point of seeking and finding here is what Jesus said. Do not accumulate treasures on earth, because they are perishable, but accumulate them in heaven, where they are eternal. So these treasures of heaven, which are what? The treasures of the Spirit. Because everything that's material, including this, is going to stay back. Everything. But the treasures of heaven, meaning the good deeds that we do for ourselves, for others, the charity, the changing someone's life, having a better outlook on things, having more faith, working on our patience, all these things that will change ourselves, change our spirit for better, to advance, these things are going to be carried on and on to our next life, not the treasures on earth. And then we bring, when we're talking about seeking and you shall find, we talk about materialism as well, which is definitely a problem that we have been having ever since humans thousands of years ago started to accumulate things. Why is it that anatomists, physiologists in general, those who apply themselves to the pursuit of the natural sciences, are so apt to fall into materialism? This is question 147 in the Spirit's book. The physiologist refers everything to the standard of his senses. Human pride imagines that it knows everything and refuses to admit there can be anything which transcends the human understanding. Science itself inspires some minds with presumption. They think that nature can have nothing hidden from them. Which again, the pride being the downfall here. Pride being this fuel for materialistic actions. And they're talking about the science because it's for the longest time, still is, science versus religion. Science versus this. Those who still don't believe in God, those know everything because, and they're saying it because of hubris, because of this idea, this pride that nature can have nothing hidden from me. I'm at the peak of the intelligence. I'm human, all of that. When we know so little still. And we're judging things that we know based on what? Our creations? Based on our senses? It's always going to fail because we are still very limited to the eternal things, to the eternal knowledge, to knowledge of what Jesus had, for instance. But we're still falling into this materialistic view of trying to observe things and measure and judge the results based on our very precarious and very simple sense. The book Plenitude, psychographed by Divaldo for Jonah, talks about trial and expiations, or trials and atonements. And one and she has this definition of those two, which I think is phenomenal. She says trial refers to the experience required or proposed by the spiritual guides before the candidate's bodily rebirth, examining their evolution records, evaluating their chances of victory, and the resources available to them for the commitment. So these trials are these things that we must still do, and that we have the whole departments of reincarnation, by the way, that help us with that, and we have these spirits that help us delineating these trials that we're going to pass and we're going to have to overcome once we are reincarnated. So these are trials. These are things that we must conquer within ourselves in our march forward. But what are atonements then? She says atonement refers to the restoration of lost balance, returning the offender to the situation he found himself in before the fall. So the idea here is the atonement is this restoration of a lost balance. And we're trying to restore ourselves. Imagine if we're walking a path forward to evolution. And then through our own weaknesses, we deviate, we fall from it. The atonement is going to be to bring us back to that path that we were on, that balance that we were on. And this sometimes can come in the form of sicknesses, can come in the form of these problems that we face in life, because they're trying to restore our balance, to vanquish a debt that oftentimes we bring from past lives. Whereas trials are these things that we choose to overcome, that we seek our trials, that we seek when we're reincarnating. And don't we need them to evolve? We do. So we seek trials. Once we're here, we forget, and then we complain. But we do seek our trials. But we should also seek our atonements, because it is through these atonements that we're going to restore the balance that was once lost. And it needs to happen. It needs to be restored in order for us to continue marching forward. So I brought here some reflections for us to do. Each person can do it in their own minds. Seek and you will find. So my first question is, what are we seeking? What are we truly seeking with the time that we have here? With the limited time we have here on earth, with this unique opportunity that we are reincarnated as we are, with those around us that we have. What are we truly seeking? What are we prioritizing in our lives? How are we handling the tools, our capabilities, our abilities as well, that we have acquired and we were given to evolve? What are we giving in return? Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. The heavens will come to your aid. All of those things, but we must give something back. And as I mentioned with the passage with the fish and the bread, what are we giving in return? What are we giving in order to receive? What are our goals in life on a day-to-day, How are we managing speech and thought? What are we giving to the world and giving to ourselves and giving to others? How are we helping ourselves and others? We saw that the law of work, the law of progress, all of that's going to come through the mission of helping each other through material means, the reincarnated spirits, as they said, as we saw in the Spirit's book. How are we helping others and ourselves to advance society, to advance ourselves, to advance humanity, advance our planet? And what treasures are we accumulating? That's the last question. With the time that we spend here, how we spend our time, how we make use of the tools we have, what treasures are we truly accumulating? Are they earthly treasures? Are they something that can turn to rust and others can steal? Or are they heavenly treasures that nobody can steal from us? That no amount of time can pass and no rust is going to come to them. And we're going to carry them forward. And with that, I thank everybody and I wish everybody a blessed week.